The Problem of Cell 13 by Jacques Futrelle. Chapter 1. The Bet. Professor Augustus S. F. X. Van Duzen's appearance was as strange as his name. He was thin, with the thin shoulders of a student, and his face was extremely pale. His eyes were the eyes of a man who studies little things. They were always half closed in concentration. Although he wore thick glasses, you could see that his eyes were blue. But his strangest feature was his abnormally large forehead, on top of which sat a crown of yellow hair. Together, all these things gave him a bizarre, almost grotesque personality. Professor Van Duzen's family came from Germany. Many of his ancestors had been famous scientists. He was the logical result, the mastermind. And logic was his passion. He believed that 2 and 2 always equal 4, except in unusual cases, when they may equal 3 or 5. He believed that all things that start must go somewhere, and he was able to concentrate all the mental force of his ancestors to solve any problem. The public knew Van Duzen as the thinking machine, and perhaps this phrase described him best of all. He spent all his time in his small laboratory, where he invented brilliant theories that shocked scientists and had a profound effect on the world. The thinking machine didn't have many visitors. When people did come to see him, they were usually scientists. 2 of these men, Dr. Charles Ransom and Alfred Fielding, visited him one evening to discuss some theory. What it was exactly is of no importance. "That is impossible," said Dr. Ransom.
"Nothing is impossible,"
said the thinking machine.
"The mind is master of all things. When science understands this, it will be a great day."
"What about the airship?" asked Dr. Ransom.
"That's not impossible at all,"
said the thinking machine.
"It will be invented soon. I would do it myself, but unfortunately I'm too busy."
Dr. Ransom laughed. "I've heard you say things like that before," he said. "But they mean nothing. The mind may be master of the material world, but there are some problems that cannot be solved by thought alone."
"Give me an example,"
demanded the thinking machine. Dr. Ransom thought for a moment as he smoked. "Well, what about the walls of a prison?" he replied. "No man can escape from a cell just by thinking about it. If he could, there would be no prisoners." He continued, "Let's imagine a case. A cell for prisoners who are condemned to death. These men will do anything to try to escape. Imagine you were in that cell. Could you escape?"
"Certainly,"
said the thinking machine.
"Of course,"
said Mr. Fielding.
"You could destroy the cell with an explosive. But if you are a prisoner inside the cell, you can't have that."
"I don't need an explosive,"
said the thinking machine.
"I would be just like any other prisoner, and I would still be able to leave the cell."
"You could escape only if you entered it with tools," said Dr. Ransom. The thinking machine was visibly irritated.
"Lock me in any cell, in any prison, anywhere, at any time, wearing only normal clothes, and I'll escape in a week,"
he declared. Dr. Ransom was interested. Mr. Fielding lit a new cigar. "You're saying that you could escape from the cell just by thinking about it?" Ransom asked.
"I could get out."
"Are you serious?"
"Certainly I'm serious."
Dr. Ransom and Mr. Fielding were silent for a long time.
"Would you like to try it?"
asked Mr. Fielding finally.
"Certainly,"
said Professor Van Duzen, and added ironically,
"I have done more ridiculous things than that to convince men of less important facts."
Of course it was an absurd thing, but they decided it at that moment. "To begin now," said Dr. Ransom.
"I'd prefer tomorrow,"
said the thinking machine.
"Because—"
"No, now,"
said Mr. Fielding.
"You will be locked in a cell with no chance to communicate with friends. You will receive exactly the same attention as a real prisoner, a man condemned to death. Do you still agree to do it?"
"All right. Now, if you want,"
said the thinking machine, and he stood up.
The death cell in Chisholm Prison.
Fine.
And what will you wear?
Very little,
said the thinking machine.
Shoes, long socks, trousers, and a shirt.
The guards will search you, of course.
They must treat me like any other prisoner,
said the thinking machine. And so they made the arrangements. They had to obtain permission for the experiment, but all three of them were important men, and everything was finalized with a few telephone calls. The prison governors could not understand why Professor Van Dusen wanted to do it, but one thing was certain. They had never had such an important prisoner. The thinking machine dressed himself in the clothes that he was going to wear in prison, and called his housekeeper.
Martha,
he said,
it is now 27 minutes past 9. I am going away. 1 week from tonight at 9:30, these gentlemen and 1 or 2 others will have dinner with me here. Remember, Dr. Ransom likes carrots.
A driver took the 3 men to Chisholm Prison. The warden was waiting for them. He understood only that Professor Van Dusen was going to be his prisoner for 1 week. He was not a criminal, but he must be treated just like any other prisoner. "Search him," said Dr. Ransom. The guards searched the thinking machine, but they didn't find anything. The pockets of his trousers were empty, and his shirt didn't have any pockets. They took off his shoes and socks, and looked inside them. Nothing. Dr. Ransom regarded Van Dusen's weak body and his colorless face. He was suddenly sorry about his idea. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked.
Would you believe me if I didn't do it?
The thinking machine replied. No.
All right, I'll do it.
Ransom didn't like the arrogance in Van Dusen's voice. His sympathy for the man disappeared. He decided that the experiment was a good thing. It would teach the thinking machine a lesson. "Will it be possible for him to communicate with anyone outside the prison?" he asked.
No, it will be absolutely impossible,
said the warden.
He will not have anything to write with.
And the guards, will they send messages for him?
Not one word,
said the warden.
They will tell me anything he says, and they will give me anything he gives them. Good, said Mr. Fielding. Of course, if he does not escape in a week, said Dr. Ransom, and asks to leave, you will let him go. I understand, said the warden.
Then the thinking machine spoke.
I have 3 requests,
he said.
I would like some toothpaste and also 1 $5 and 2 $10 bills.
Could he bribe your guards for $25?
Not even for $2,500. In that case, give him the money, said Mr. Fielding.
And what is the 3rd request? Asked Dr. Ransom.
Could somebody clean my shoes?
The 3 men looked very surprised. This last request seemed completely absurd, but they agreed to it anyway. After this, they took the thinking machine to his cell. They walked down a long corridor and stopped at the 3rd steel door.
Here is cell 13,
said the warden.
This is where condemned killers are kept. No one can leave it without my permission. No one in it can communicate with anyone outside. It is very near my office, and I can hear any noise that comes from it.
Is this cell all right, gentlemen?
Asked the thinking machine.
Yes, it's perfect,
replied Fielding and Ransom together. The guard opened the door, and the thinking machine walked into the dark room. No sooner was he inside than the warden closed the door and locked it with a double lock. Ransom heard a noise from inside the cell. What is that noise? He asked through the bars.
Rats. The cell is full of rats,
replied the thinking machine. The 3 men said good night, and were turning to go when the thinking machine called.
What time is it exactly, Warden?
17 minutes past 11.
Thanks. I will see you all in your office at 8:30, 1 week from this evening,
said the thinking machine.
And if you do not?
There is no possibility of that.
Chapter 2. Chisholm Prison. Chisholm Prison was a large building. It was 4 floors high and stood in the center of a large open space. The wall around it was 6 meters high and impossible to climb. Even if a man managed to escape from his cell, he could not pass over the wall. The yard around the building was 8 meters wide on all sides. This was the distance from the prison building to the wall. During the day, prisoners used the yard to do exercises. But it was not for those prisoners in cell 13. There were always 4 armed guards in the yard, 1 for each side of the building. At night, strong lights illuminated the yard and the wall. The wires that carried electricity to these lights ran up the walls of the building. The thinking machine saw and understood all these things. He had to stand on his bed to see out of the small barred window. It was the morning after his incarceration. He soon realized that somewhere on the other side of the wall there was a river, because he could hear the sound of a boat and saw a river bird in the sky. From the same direction he heard the sound of children playing baseball, so he knew that there was a children's playground between the prison wall and the river. No man had ever escaped from Chisholm Prison, and it was easy to see why. The walls of the cell were perfectly solid, and the bars on the window were new. And in any case, the window itself was too small to escape through. But this didn't discourage the thinking machine. He looked up at the light and saw how the wire went from it to the wall of the prison building. He realized that the wire passed near the window of his cell. That could be useful. Cell 13 was on the same floor as the prison offices. The thinking machine couldn't see the ground through the window of his cell. However, there were only 4 steps up to the office floor. Therefore, the cell must be near the ground. Good. The thinking machine remembered how he had come to the cell. First, there was the outside guards' room, which formed part of the wall next to the prison gates. There was always one guard at these gates who let people come into the prison and then let them out again when the warden told him to. The warden's office was in the prison building. From the yard you had to pass through a solid steel door to get to it. The door had only one small hole in it to see who was there. Then between the office and cell 13 there was a heavy wooden door and 2 steel doors in the corridors of the prison. Then, of course, there was the door of cell 13.
There are 7 doors between cell 13 and freedom,
thought the thinking machine.
It will not be easy, but there are advantages. I am alone here. Nobody looks at what I am doing. There is one guard who brings my food 3 times a day at 6 o'clock in the morning, at noon, then again at 6 in the afternoon. And then there is the inspection at 9 o'clock, but that is all.
There was nothing, absolutely nothing in his cell, except a bed that was strongly made and impossible to dismantle. There was no chair, no table, no cup or fork or spoon. Nothing. The guard watched him while he ate and took away his plate and spoon as soon as he had finished. The thinking machine considered all these facts very carefully. Then he began an examination of his cell. He examined the stones in the walls and roof and the cement between them. He walked over the floor many times, but it was solid cement. After the examination, he sat on his bed and thought for a long time, because Professor Augustus S.F.X. Van Dusen had something to think about. Suddenly he was disturbed by a rat, which ran across his foot and disappeared into a dark corner of the cell. The thinking machine looked hard into the corner. After some time, he saw several pairs of yellow eyes looking back at him. Then, for the first time, the thinking machine noticed the bottom of his cell door. There was a space of about 5 centimeters between the steel bar and the floor. The thinking machine walked into the corner where the rats were, but he continued to look at the door. The rats were afraid and tried to escape. There was the sound of running feet and several squeaks, and then silence. None of the rats had gone out the door, yet the cell was now empty. Therefore, there must be another way out of the cell, even if it was very small. He got down on his hands and knees and began to look for the opening. Finally, he found it. It was a small circular hole in the floor, about 4 centimeters in diameter.
So this is how the rats escaped. Interesting.
He put his hand in the hole. It seemed to be an old drain pipe. The thinking machine sat on the bed and thought for an hour. Then he looked once more outside his cell window. One of the outside guards stood directly opposite, beside the wall. He was looking at the window of cell 13 when the thinking machine's large head appeared. But the professor didn't see the guard. At 12 o'clock, the cell 13 guard brought the thinking machine his food. It was horrible, but the thinking machine didn't mind. He wasn't interested in food. He spoke to the guard, who watched him as he ate.
Have they made any modifications here in the last few years?
Asked the thinking machine. Not really, said the guard. They built the new wall 4 years ago.
Have they done anything to the prison building?
Well, they painted the outside, and then 7 years ago they had a new plumbing system installed.
Ah, I see,
said the prisoner.
How far is the river over there?
About 100 meters. The boys have a baseball ground between the wall and the river. The thinking machine had nothing more to say, but when the guard was ready to go, he asked for some water.
I get very thirsty here,
he explained.
Could I have some water in a cup, please?
I'll ask the warden, replied the guard, and he went away. Half an hour later, he returned with a small cup. The warden says you may keep this cup, he told the prisoner, but you must show it to me when I ask for it. If you break it, I won't give you another one.
Thank you,
said the thinking machine.
I won't break it.
2 hours later, the same guard was passing the door of cell 13. He heard a noise and stopped. The thinking machine was on his hands and knees in a corner of the cell. There was the sound of several squeaks. The guard watched him.
Ah, I've got you,
he heard the prisoner say. What have you got? Said the guard.
One of these rats,
he replied.
See?
The guard saw a rat in the thinking machine's hands. The prisoner carried it towards the light.
It's a water rat,
he said. Haven't you got anything better to do than catch rats? Asked the guard.
It's terrible that there are rats in this prison,
said the thinking machine.
Take this one away and kill it. There are many more where it came from.
The guard took the rat and killed it. Later he told the warden about the incident, but the warden only smiled. Later that afternoon, the armed guard in the yard outside cell 13 saw the prisoner look out and put a hand through the bars of the window. Something white fell slowly to the ground. It was a roll of linen from a shirt, and wrapped around it was a $5 bill. The guard looked up at the window again, but the face was no longer there. With a smile, he took the cloth and the $5 bill to the warden's office. There was something written on the outside of the cloth in strange ink. It said,
Please deliver to Dr. Charles Ransom.
Ha!
said the warden.
His first plan of escape has failed. But why did he address it to Dr. Ransom?
And where did he get the pen and ink to write with? Added the guard. The warden looked at the guard, and the guard looked at the warden. There was no easy solution to the mystery. The warden studied the writing carefully.
Well, let's see what he wanted to say to Dr. Ransom,
he said. He unrolled the second piece of linen.
Well, if that... What? What do you think of that?
He asked, extremely confused. The guard took the piece of linen and read, Epa xeat dnet niawe tu si T. Chapter 3. A Message from Cell 13. The warden spent an hour trying to discover what the message was. Why did his prisoner want to talk to Dr. Ransom? And where had he got the materials to write? He examined the linen again. It was a part of a white shirt. But what had he written with? The warden knew that the prisoner didn't have a pen or a pencil. So what had he used? The warden decided to investigate. The thinking machine was his prisoner.
If this man is trying to escape by sending coded messages,
he thought,
I will stop him.
The warden returned to cell 13. He found the thinking machine on his hands and knees. He was catching rats. The prisoner heard the warden and turned to him quickly.
It's terrible,
he said.
These rats, there are hundreds of them.
Other men can live with them,
said the warden.
Give me your shirt. Here's another one.
Why?
Demanded the thinking machine.
You have attempted to communicate with Dr. Ransom,
said the warden angrily.
As the warden of this prison, I must stop you.
The thinking machine was silent for a moment.
All right,
he said finally.
Here, take it.
The warden smiled. The prisoner stood up and took off his shirt. He gave it to the warden. In exchange, the warden gave him a blue prison shirt. The warden looked at the thinking machine's white shirt. He compared the pieces of linen he had with the shirt. It was torn in 2 places. The thinking machine watched him.
Did the guard give you those?
He asked.
Yes, he did,
said the warden.
And that is the end of your first attempt to escape.
The thinking machine watched the warden as he looked at the shirt. He saw that there were only 2 pieces missing from it. He smiled.
What did you write this message with?
Asked the warden.
I'm afraid you must discover that,
the thinking machine said. The warden became angry, but he didn't say anything more. He made a very careful inspection of the cell and the prisoner. But he found nothing. Nothing that the thinking machine could use as a pen. And the liquid that he had used to write the message was also a mystery. Finally, the warden went out of the cell. He took the thinking machine's shirt with him.
Well, he won't escape by writing messages on a shirt,
the warden thought. On the 3rd day of his incarceration, the thinking machine tried to bribe the guard so that he could escape. The guard brought his food and waited outside the cell door.
The drain pipes of the prison go to the river, don't they?
The thinking machine asked. Yes, said the guard.
I imagine they are very small.
Yes, they are too small to escape through. There was silence. The thinking machine finished his food. Then he said,
You know I'm not a criminal, don't you?
Yep.
And I can leave the prison if I want to.
Yes.
Well, when I came here, I believed I could escape,
said the prisoner.
Will you help me if I give you some money?
The guard was an honest man. No, he said.
$500,
said the thinking machine.
I am not a criminal.
No, said the guard.
1,000.
No. If you gave me $10,000, I couldn't get you out. To get out, you have to pass through 7 doors, and I only have the keys to 2. The guard ran to the warden's office and told him about the prisoner's offer.
Plan number 2 fails,
said the warden and smiled.
First a message, and then a bribe.
At 6 o'clock, the guard went to cell 13 again to bring food to the thinking machine. He stopped in the corridor. There was a noise coming from inside the cell. The guard walked very quietly to the cell door. Through the bars, he saw the thinking machine at the window. He was trying to cut through the iron bars of the window with a file. The guard went back to the office and told the warden. The 2 men went back to cell 13, walking very quietly. The warden looked into the cell and saw the thinking machine still at the window. He entered the cell. The thinking machine turned round and jumped onto the floor. He tried to hide the file in his hand.
"Give it to me,"
said the warden.
"No,"
said the prisoner. There was anger in his voice.
"Come on, give it to me."
"No,"
repeated the thinking machine.
"Very well. Search him,"
said the warden to the guard. The guard searched the thinking machine. After some minutes, he found a piece of steel, about 5 centimeters long, in the prisoner's trousers. A few minutes later, he found another piece. The guard gave the pieces of steel to the warden. The warden looked at them.
"You couldn't cut through the bars on the window with these,"
he said.
"Yes, I could,"
said the thinking machine.
"In 6 months, perhaps,"
said the warden, smiling.
"Just wait, you'll see,"
said the thinking machine. Once more the guard searched the cell, but once more they found nothing. The warden stood on the bed and looked at the bars of the window. He took the bars in his hand and tried to move them. They were immovable. He smiled and then got down from the bed.
"Forget it, Professor. You will never escape from here,"
he said. The thinking machine said nothing. He just sat on the bed with his head in his hands. The warden and the guard went out of the cell and closed the door.
"He is mad to try and escape,"
said the warden.
"but he is very clever. I would like to know what he used to write that coded message."
It was 4 o'clock the next morning when a terrible scream resounded through the prison. It came from a cell near the center of the building, a sound full of horror and great fear. The warden heard it and ran with 3 of his men into the long corridor that went to cell 13.